All right, we are going to continue week 13 with part 2, getting started with comprehension. We have 3 session objectives this week. The first is to be able to determine appropriate measures to assess comprehension. Again, you're going to have more autonomy in the selection of these assessments this week. Our next objective is to report and analyze results from the comprehension assessments. And lastly, to be able to discuss next steps for comprehension instruction, which will come from analyzing the assessment results and then planning accordingly based on need. All right, let's talk about the course readings for this week. So first, looking at that optional article which traces comprehension research back to its origins in the early 70s and 80s. So in the 1970s and 80s, comprehension was thought to be dependent on the reader's prior knowledge. If the reader has extensive knowledge associated with the text ideas, then comprehension will be high. However, it was found that comprehension can still be limited even with extensive prior knowledge, and vice versa. You can still comprehend even if you don't have prior knowledge. Therefore, comprehension is more than prior knowledge. Good readers employ conscious, active comprehension processes throughout reading. And they actually cite a study that was done with adult readers where the researchers asked adults to read a text and then stop pretty frequently to discuss what they're thinking and what they're doing as they read. And they charted a brief summary of all the activities that are possible that adult readers do in reading, and Presley and Afflerbach first noted 21 pages worth of different strategies that get employed. So clearly comprehension isn't just prior knowledge. It is a lot more than that. So the reading processes, like I said, they first determine pages and pages, 21 pages of different processes. Some of the key ones to mention before reading: setting a purpose, why and what will I gain. During reading, actively looking for information tied to that goal or purpose you have. Relating important points in the text to one another, being able to integrate ideas, which is a type of, not causal inference, but the other one, relational inference, making relational inferences. Constructing hypotheses and conclusions, determining word meanings, underlining, rereading, making notes, or paraphrasing to help remember information, examining cause and effect relationships, those are those causal inferences, making inferences, monitoring as you read or metacognition. After reading, continuing to reflect on the text, rereading, reskimming important parts, and making notes. So these are all the things that we're doing as we read, and then some. So there are lots of processes happening as we read. The truth revealed. The authors of this article discuss in 1978-79, Dolores Durkin did some observations of 3rd and 6th grade classrooms, I believe in New York, and she found that teachers are frequently assessing comprehension by asking comprehension questions. However, she didn't actually catch people teaching comprehension. And why not? Well, whoever blamed the Basils, because the Basel reading series at that time didn't provide a lot of instruction on comprehension strategies, but they did provide a lot of assessments for comprehension. So Durkin's expose prompted a lot of the early research on comprehension in the 1970s and 80s, and also a lot of attention to the fact that we need to be teaching comprehension. So then we had early research in which researchers identified and validated individual comprehension strategies that proved effective. So first they looked at which strategies are effective and which ones will provide fuller representation of text if we provide instruction. Individual strategies of note include prior knowledge, main idea, mental images, visualization, and inferences. So early research concluded that those 4 strategies were integral in creating a fuller representation of the text. Now the next phase of research moved into looking at the most effective ways to teach the strategies. So now we know that there are all these processes happening. We've identified some of the more important ones, if you can even say that they're more important, but what are the best ways to actually teach these strategies? First would be reciprocal teaching, and these aren't the only ways to teach the strategies, but these are the ones that this phase of research found to be especially notable as having an impact. And the first would be reciprocal teaching, during which a student teacher leads the group in posing questions and making predictions. And then the second being direct explanation approach or direct instruction, where the teacher explains, does some mental modeling, and then provides some practice opportunities. So, effective comprehension instruction, what conclusions can we draw? It's long term. There's direct explanation with modeling. Teachers coach while students practice. So it's very important that teachers don't do the work for the student, but coach the student as to what to do. Students model the strategy use for one another. The usefulness of the strategies and their application is also taught. So I think a couple weeks ago I was mentioning the Debbie Miller article I read, which talked about how comprehension strategies shouldn't be the sole purpose of instruction. You shouldn't just be teaching the comprehension strategies, but you should be teaching them as a means to an end, as a means to learn from the text, whatever it is, the content you are trying to deliver. So they are not the means in and of themselves, they are means to a bigger end. And then also teachers should model the strategies throughout the day, not just during one isolated comprehension time, but also in other content areas. So how are we doing now? Well, in the 90s, Marilyn Yeager Adams pushed letter and word level processing. As a result, processing at the text level and comprehension was less emphasized. In the 90s, Presley went back and did a similar study to Durkin and observed 4th and 5th grade classrooms here in upstate New York for an entire school year, and again saw very little teaching of comprehension. They did do a lot of reading, but reading doesn't lead to automatic strategy use. When children are taught just one comprehension strategy, their reading improves. So we really need to provide comprehension strategy instruction. And I think we're starting to swing back that way from text level or word level processing back over to text level processing, especially with the Common Core, and being able to apply information you are learning from a text in order to do some sort of written performance task. All right, next article we're going to talk about is the Assessing Comprehension article from the Reading Teacher. They assert in the beginning that state tests are limiting information provided to the teacher and have a delay in reporting. So teachers need more resources, more sources for assessment, ongoing classroom-based assessment that can actually be used to adjust and plan instruction. So comprehension should be monitored regularly with a variety of texts, considering the learner's prior knowledge and purposes for reading. Props to Wisconsin. They discuss a Wisconsin school district who developed a comprehensive classroom-based assessment process where they took a 4-point rubric twice a year to evaluate student progress, and they used samples from classroom work. and the reading specialist work with the teachers to conduct this ongoing assessment and to use it to plan instruction. So you can see the actual rubric in their article. You could actually consider how to use and apply that rubric to your practice and to your work with your student. These are all the facets of comprehension that they considered in their instruction and assessment: prior knowledge, literal comprehension, interpretive comprehension, critical thinking, story parts, word meaning, be able to organize information, text structure, visualization, analyzing questions, generating questions, summarizing, applying reading strategies, and then employing fix-up strategies. So when you're conducting your assessments with your student, you want to be looking at all these areas similar to how they did in the article and be looking for deficiencies in any of these areas so that you can plan instruction to help with that. Definitely the challenge with comprehension is that it employs a lot of mental processes, so you really need to make that thinking and strategy use visible. Ways you can do that is by having students jot down ideas on sticky notes, having them do think alouds, having them write journal responses, doing any sort of daily written assignment work, using graphic organizers. Then once you make their thinking visible, you're able to analyze those responses to determine needs and set goals for further instruction. So that is the downfall of comprehension, is just by asking a question, it may not be easy to see what's going on cognitively with the student. So try to get as much information as you possibly can as you're developing your assessments this week to really get in the mind of your student and get an understanding for where they're coming from. All right, the last article you read this week is They Can Read the Words, but They Can't Understand DeWitts and DeWitts 2003. They talk about a student named Mark who reads with accuracy, fluency, and expression, and everything sounds great. He reads with 98% accuracy, 132 words a minute on average. However, his comprehension questions, his performance on those show that he's poor on the 6th grade passages, on the 4th grade ones. He performs poorly for silent reading, for oral reading, and for familiar text. So what's going on with Mark? Well, it could be a number of things. Similar to the way we analyze miscues for decoding, you also need to analyze miscues for comprehension. And I love this article and how they give us terms to use in analyzing the question types and really thinking concretely about what's happening with the student. So what's going on with Mark? Well, it could be a failure to link ideas across a passage. So that would be a type of relational inference, where maybe they pick up information from one segment of text but fail to integrate it with other ideas. So in the sample question, they asked him, what was Martin Luther King's main goal? He wanted blacks to have seats on the buses as well as white. So he's really picking up on the idea of, equity on, the buses, on the transportation, but he's not seeing the big picture. That would be an example of a relational inference he's failing to make. Second, it could be a failure to make causal inferences. So this would be being able to infer the antecedent of an action or determining the consequence of the action. For example, what happened when people refused to ride the buses? Being able to say what happened after that, making that inference, cause and relationship. Also, failure to avoid syntax or failure processing the syntax. Sometimes sentences are awfully complex, and they give the example of from the Johnny Appleseed text and how they asked him where he got the seeds from, but the sentence which mentions that is very confusing syntactically because it said he got many of his seeds from farmers who squeezed apples to make a drink called cider. So is the answer farmers? Is it cider? Why is that cider information in there? Excessive elaboration is actually over-reliance on prior knowledge, and this is something I see all the time where they're not even using the text to answer the question. They're just making up their own answer, or they're using their their own prior knowledge, sometimes inventing knowledge that's not even the passage. And then lastly, failure to know a key vocabulary word, either in the question or in the passage, can also inhibit comprehension. And then no response, they have no idea. So when we come back, we will talk more about Mark's miscues and then continue on with our quest to talk